Hey, it's Mazzy, and this is the 2023 vinyl tag. Vinyl tag is something that you're seeing everywhere right now if you're watching these YouTube videos, these vinyl community videos. It's the one time a year where everyone seemingly comes together and answers the same question, showcase records for these 20 questions. It's a great time to jump in if you haven't done videos before, if you want to get into this weird and wacky community. And it's a fun way to show some records. So I'm going to go through these 20 questions. These were created this year by Rob Walker from Manchester, England. And there is a link below if you want to watch his original video and watch a lot of them. Do the hashtag, search on YouTube vinyl tag 2023 and watch the variety of people who have completed these already. So here's my contribution going through the 20 questions. Number one, your favorite new release of 22. Well, if you watched my best of video, this was my favorite album, Orville Peck, baritone country over-the-top singer. He's like 70s Elvis Presley, little, Suspicious Minds and a little bit kind of do. I can't even do it right now. Lost my voice today. Also Roy Orbison and Chris Isaak, over the top but really catchy hooks, and Bruce Springsteen-like in terms of the over Spectre-like production of Born to Run and that. But I just love this record. It's a fun record. However, as much as I showed this already, I just want to show my number one box set, because this is literally my favorite release, and it came out late in the year, in December actually. And this is the For the Bird box set that benefits the Audubon Society. 20 LPs. I pull out every night almost one of these records and play it. And it's a variety of all kinds of music, bird related. Most of the pieces of music were created during the pandemic, the lockdown, when everything was silent in our cities and people were home and you could hear the birds chirp and the birds sing. And this was inspired by that. There's poetry, there's actors reading poems within and without the music. And it's just a really great listen. No matter which disc I pull out, I really enjoy it. Lovely design by Smog Design. And so that is something I just had to show. The last band or solo artist you saw, almost the last band. This is September, but I'm trying to think if I saw someone after that. But I went to see Stereolab, and Stereolab played in Seattle. I only got into Stereolab in the last few years, I've been around quite a bit. I'd say these are my two favorite albums, the infamous Dots and Loops, very famous title. It's been hijacked for vinyl community here members, as well as Emperor Tomato Ketchup. They're a bit of mix of Yee Girls Lounge, electronica, psychedelic, French pop, Bachelor Pad, and it's just fun stuff. I love this. I love them. And I got all these reissues. The reissues are great. 3 LPs with outtakes and alternative versions and released stuff in books, and really, really reasonable priced. Their first album was the best album. I'm showing a couple, and then I'm wearing one. Let me start with the one I'm wearing, X, the first X album. The great LA punk band with John Doe, Exene Cervenka, Billy Zoom, and Brokeback, the drummer. Now, what made them different, Billy Zoom in a way made them different. He was like a rockabilly, great guitar player. A lot of punk bands didn't really have great musicianship, but they crossed over a little bit also into the Americana, which we didn't even know was called Americana yet. Saw them a bunch of times in San Francisco and LA in 1980, I believe, when that first album was released. Produced by Ray Manzarek of The Doors. What a great record. What a great, great, great record. The last live show I saw before lockdown was X also. Then I'm going to show, this is a cliche in a way, but what a great record. I mean, this is an important record, iconic record that no one knew was iconic when it came out because hardly anyone bought it in reality, but it's become so influential over the years. This is my 1971 or 72 copy. Beautiful, pristine. Never peeled the banana off on MGM, excuse me, Verve Records. I guess MGM, I think they were distributing them at the time. Hat trick, show the vinyl, CD, cassette of the same album. Now, Rob, why do you use the term hat trick? Because I was thinking of doing like, some kind of a, I can't even get my hats right here. Kind of a change out hat trick thing, like doing like, the shell game thing like that. But he wants, if you have it, to show the same album you have in different formats. And what I'm going to show here is an album by Tony Williams, the jazz drummer Tony Williams. He had a series of albums of his band from 85 to around 92, 93 for Blue Note Records. And this is Native Heart. I'm showing this mainly because it's the only one I can think of that I have right now with all three formats. And I'm also showing it because my photographer, Michelle Clement, photographed this, and I kind of negotiated this project with Blue Note Records. But what's great about this is I was able to get a box of LPs. This is around the time when CDs were getting more prevalent. And so, of course, I got the CD of it. I'd get a box of LPs, a box of CDs, and a box of cassettes was part of the negotiating process. This interesting little fun fact, they had to retouch the nipple out of this so they get this in the box stores. Like, I don't think box stores are really selling a lot of Tony Williams, but at the time, maybe. But this is kind of a cool record. So Michelle Clement photographed this. The designer Tom Bonaro designed it. Native Heart, Tony Williams. Tony would give Michelle a recording, a tape, or a CD of the music and a title, and she could do whatever she wanted with it. And that was pretty great. Next is an album that starts with the same letter. How about a palindrome? That's the perfect thing. And I'm going to use the Grateful Dead. Axomoxoxa. I used to know how to pronounce this. Axomoxoa. Axomoxoa. This is a great Grateful Dead record, great psychedelic record. And that's a palindrome, which is not what he's asking, but it starts with A and ends with A. So there you go there. Born in the Same Year. Okay, this is an easy one. Elvis Costello. I am exactly 2 days older than Elvis Costello. In fact, there is probably more. We both wear hats, both wear glasses, we both have facial hair, and I'm 2 days older than Elvis. In 2008, I actually literally bumped into him, and we bumped into each other at a pub restaurant bar called the Spotted Pig in Manhattan. And it was a crowded bar, and he was with his wife, Diane Krall, and it was a crowded, and they were going to their table, and I turned around, and we bumped, and we locked eyes. Our eyes locked. So I locked eyes with my kid 2 days younger than me, Elvis Costello, same year. Okay, and the next question is the most listened to album in 2022. I love the beauty of this album. Almost every Sunday I put this record on throughout this year. And this is the Johnny Greenwood soundtrack to Spencer, the biopic of Princess Di. Just a beautiful record. I'm a big fan of all of Johnny Greenwood's soundtracks. Of course, Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead. He does great scoring and great composition, and I really like, my favorite soundtrack of his is Phantom Thread, the Paul Thomas Anderson film. He's done several, including There Will Be Blood and a few others, Inherent Vice. But this is such a lovely record. I haven't seen the film, but I love this record, and this has been in heavy rotation this entire year. I believe it might have come out the end of 2021, but I really got it in 2022, and that's when I played it. The most listened to artist this year, and that would have to be, and I'm not quite sure why, but he's someone I go back to a lot, and that is Leonard Cohen. Of course, this is a UK copy of songs of Leonard Cohen, and of course, his last album he did. There was a posthumous album after this, but this is very much in the realm of David Bowie's last album, not musically, but you can tell it's a final output of a dying man. And You Want It Darker is just a really, really beautiful record, opening up with his cantor out of Montreal, Canada, doing a Jewish chant on You Want It Darker. Yehaney, Yehaney. Beautiful, beautiful, touching record. Artist I listen to most. Australian artist or band. You know, my obvious pick would have been Nick Cave. He's probably my favorite artist. He's someone I saw this year, earlier in the year as well. But the artist I like a lot, the duo, they have 4 albums. I'm just showing 2 of them, is Leluc. They're now in Brooklyn, but they're from Australia. 2 great albums on Sub Pop. I think 3 of their 4 albums are on Sub Pop. They more inspired, more upbeat than folk, but beautiful harmonies. She's mainly singing, he sings background, plays guitar, and they just have a beautiful dynamic together. The recordings are lovely. You know, I could go either way with either of these records. This is called Dear Hamlin, and this is called Sculptor. I almost prefer this one, but either one. Saw them live when they came through Seattle a couple years ago, 3 years ago now, 4 years ago, pre-pandemic. But these are gorgeous records from Australian artist Leluc. Just, there's a certain beauty, ethereal beauty, but more so. Not like dream pop at all, but just something. And they're very in the moment, and they sound really, really good. Question number 10 is surprising purchase of the year, and I would have to say it's the Bob Marley Rostamon Vibration Tough Gong UHQR from Acoustic Sound Analog Productions. Those of you know I'm not a fan of these boxes, but I gotta tell you, the actual record is a stunner. It sounds great. I actually put it in this sleeve. I'm probably gonna lose the box at some point and store it away. But this beautiful rattan cover, embossed, really nicely done here. And it sounds really, really, really good. But as I say ad nauseum, this box, okay, do we need a record in that box? Do we need a specs and manual for this? Something you could probably print smaller as an insert inside the record or on the website. You need another pressing team promotion, a certificate of authenticity. I know I have a record. I know it's Clarity Vinyl. Does this have to be another thing? Can't this be part of the same promo piece? Do you have to have a sales sheet included? I mean, I know we used to have those on inserts. We had the sales sheet as part of the inner sleeve. Then we also have a booklet. So I think this would be enough. You don't need the promo material. This is kind of a nice little thing. Now, of course, maybe you could reduce the type. We're not all that old, or we have glasses, and make this book smaller, or maybe it just fits in here, and there you go. That would be great. I'm not even gonna talk about the price, but this was something I didn't expect to get, and I do love the music and the record, and that's what it's about, but I probably won't be buying many, if any, more of these type of packages in the future. Okay, the next question is an artist or band you're a completist with. Now, interesting question. It's an obvious question. Of course, there's the Beatles, Birds, and Kinks, my favorite 3 bands, and Bob Dylan. Completist, not everyone takes it in terms of full completion. You don't complete half the time. A completist, you have to get the greatest hits. You have to get the live albums. You have to get the comps. You have to be a completist. Now, having said that, do you need every color variant? No. You might, but do you need every cover variant? Maybe. So there's certain levels of being a completist, but for the sake of this, I'm picking my favorite guitar player, and I've mentioned him many times, and that's Cooder. Of course, Boomer Story, one of my favorite albums, one of his early records. I believe this is his 3rd album. And then, you know, around 75, 70, 76 is Paradise and Lunch. Might be my favorite Ry Cooder record. Love this record. A little bit of Tex-Mex. Flaco Jimenez is on here. The great piano player Earl Hines is on here with Diddy Wah Diddy. Love this record. His collaborations are important. And this with Manuel Gabon. Of course, Ry Cooder curated and produced a Buena Vista Social Club album, and this is out of that. This came out of that guitar player. Very Cuban surf-like guitar duets by the two of them. What a great record on Non-Stitch Records. Seek this out because it's a gorgeous, gorgeous record. And I, you know, get every great soundtrack that he does. And this is Johnny Handsome. This is interesting. Movie. I did see the movie. Music by Ry Cooder, Johnny Handsome with Mickey Rourke about a guy that gets a face change. This is a Walter Hill film, and Ry Cooder did more soundtracks with Walter Hill than any other single director. All his soundtracks are great, and this is amongst my favorite. Great run of 3 albums. I mean, there's so many here again, too. I thought of this first because it popped into my head. A lot of times, obviously, the music is what pops into my head first, but also the visuals on this is what popped in my head. And these are the 80s period of King Crimson. These 3 records are basically, you know, this one is called literally 3 of a Perfect Pair, and these are 3 of a perfect pair of albums. This is that sort of the post-punk period of King Crimson, when they had Adrian Belew and Tony Levin making up. Of course, Bill Bruford is back. But this, I saw this period of them live, and this is them more amped up than the early days of this psychedelic, proggy early thing of King Crimson. This is more upbeat. This is more, in a way, the African beats, what the Talking Heads were doing at the time, in the late 70s, early 80s as well. Great, great trilogy of albums. And of course, these great covers with 3 of a Perfect Pair. Beat, I think Beat's my favorite of these, and Discipline. All these are great, great albums. 2 out of the 3 are promos I got when these albums actually came out. But then when I really started thinking about 3 records in a row, one of the most amazing achievements in rock and roll albums is Creedence Clearwater Revival. These 3 records. And we all know the hits. A lot of people know the deep cuts. What's amazing about these 3 albums, all 3 of these came out in the same year. All 3 of these came out in 1969. First there was Bayou Country. Then there was Green River and Willie and the Poor Boys. All had huge hits, huge singles. 3 albums, 3 aside from King Gizzard these days that puts out an album a week, or Neil Young who puts out an album a month. I can't think of anyone. Even the Beatles put, aside from American Capitol Records, you know, diluting their releases, they didn't put any more records out than 2 a year. 2, 66 1, 67 2, 68 1, but it was a double record. Oh, well, Yellow Submarine, that was January 69. So the Beatles never did it either, but Creedence Clearwater, these 3 records, a trilogy in 1969. 1 year, 3 amazing rock and roll records. Okay, now for an 80s soundtrack. One of my all-time favorite films is by Wim Wenders, and in 1986, he put out this film, 86, 87 actually, 87, 88. Anyway, this film in the 1980s, Wings of Desire. This is an English pressing of this movie. Great, there's some spoken bits by Bruno Ganz, who is in it. It's about angels, and Columbo is in it, Peter Falk, the actor. It's a surreal, beautiful black and white film. But the score is classical string quartets. Nick Cave, I think this is my first introduction to Nick Cave. He's within the film, a live performance of Nick Cave in a performance live. That's in it. And it's just, everything about this is just a perfect record. And the German spoken interludes by Bruno Ganz just adds to the beauty of this record. Wim Wenders is a favorite director of mine. And Wings of Desire is a very favorite, one of the most beautifully photograph films I've ever seen as well. The next one is we lost them in 2022, and there are a lot of famous musicians that we lost this year. But I want to show someone who hasn't got a lot of notice and recognition, and that is Ian Tyson. His chiseled look, his low baritone voice. He was half of the folk duo of Ian and Sylvia. They were managed by Albert Grossman, who also managed Peter, Paul and Mary and Bob Dylan. And Grossman got them signed to Vanguard Record, and they did a stream of wonderful collaborations. And this song that Ian Tyson wrote, Four Strong Winds. These two Canadian artists through Greenwich Village and the folk scene there. But Four Strong Winds is a song that would be covered by a lot of artists, including Neil Young. The final track on Comes a Time is his cover version of Four Strong Winds. If you've seen Heart of Gold, the documentary that Jonathan Demme directed, he talks about listening to this song over and over again in Canada on a jukebox, playing it over and over and over again. It's a lovely, lovely song. Ian Tyson would also go on to write Someday Soon, the song that in 1969 became a huge hit for Judy Collins with Stephen Stills on that record. That version is a sublime version, is the definitive version of Someday Soon. Just to mention, Sylvia Tyson, formerly Sylvia Flicker, wrote the song You Were On My Mind, a huge hit by the We5 in 1965 as well. So Ian Tyson became a Canadian cowboy, owned a ranch eventually, came back time and time again, doing more on the country circuits of Canada and around. And what a great voice. Probably one of the best voices of all the folk artists, maybe next to Phil Oakes, who has that golden voice, but his low baritone voice and the harmonies with Ian, and there's video of him with Emmylou Harris, Linda Ronstadt, and others over the years. It's just sublime. Great songwriter. We lost him just at the very end, the last couple weeks of 2022. Okay, the next one is question number 15, the most disappointing purchase in 2022. You think if it's disappointing, why do you have it? Sometimes you have to dive in and step away from an album, and then you play it again, and then it works for you. And this is going to disappoint some people, but this is the latest, newest, first album in a dozen years or so by Porcupine Tree. PTCC, Porcupine Tree, Closure, Continuation. Prog, electronic. Now Steven Wilson, of course, is the one that people know, and I'm a fan of his mixes and remixes of all these prog albums like Yes and Jethro Tull and King Crimson. And I have several of their older albums. I like their more psychedelic crossover with metal albums. They have this, they're a chameleon, and they almost don't know what they want. Now, this album obviously is probably a result out of pandemic, maybe started before, back and forth, not in the same room, internet, nothing wrong with that in terms of making an album. But this album is a cold album to me. It's too calculated to me. I've listened to it maybe 6, 7 times, and it's one of those albums, every time I listen to it, I want to like it more. I want to enjoy it more. You know, there's some things you think you need to enjoy more. And I think I saw a couple lists that this is in their top 10 of the year. All the power to you. I just think there is something, like, obviously I don't think there's a lot of soul in prog music, but even with King Crimson or the early Yes albums, or even with those 3 80s post-punk-ish prog records, the trilogy by King Crimson, there's some soul there. There's musicians connecting. Now, technically, the guitars are great. The keyboards are great. The drumming is amazing. But there's something missing. So it's a big disappointment for me. It's a disappointing purchase. I'm going to keep it up and keep trying it for a while before I get rid of it. I need to give it a chance. But right now, where I am right now in January 2023, this is the biggest disappointment of the year for me. Number 16 is a non-vinyl purchase. Now, could have showed a dozen eggs or a loaf of bread or a carton of milk, but I'm showing Rocky. This is Rocky. This is Fender. Now, Rocky, if you don't know, to some this is an ugly guitar, but I think this is beautiful psychedelic. Fender guitars were hard to get in the UK early on, and when the Beatles were touring the States, there wasn't a lot of time. In 1965, the Beatles were recording and sent Mal Evans, their roadie and assistant, out to buy a couple of Strats. And he went somewhere in London and bought two identical blue Strats, one for John and one for George Harrison. I don't know why Paul didn't get a Strat then. Anyway, that was the first Strats the Beatles had. In 1967, George started painting him in a psychedelic manner, using Day-Glo paints, which were new at the time in 1967, including Patty's nail polish, and this became a famous guitar as featured in Magical Mystery Tour and the All You Need Is Love video, the first live broadcast, world satellite broadcast around the world. And this is an infamous guitar, the original of this. Now, Fender did put out a version a few years ago, very limited, from the custom factory in Southern California, Fender Custom Factory. And those go for something like, I don't know, they're $25,000. I think they made 10 of them, give or take. So this past year, they made a regular edition. These are made in Mexico, hand-painted again, but just a fun guitar. And for Mexican Strat, they actually sound really good. But of course, you buy a guitar like this for the design, and as a Beatle collector, I think this is a fun addition. So they did sell out, but this is Rocky, made in Mexico. Just love this. It's a fun guitar, you know, like this thing. There you go. So that's my non-vinyl purchase in 2022. You found a holy grail. That's the next question. A holy grail. Now, actually, I kind of got this. I found it in the Coleman collection at the towards the end of last year, well, the year before, of 2021. But it's a record that I had been looking for, and Coleman and I always talked about it. And I kind of, like, in a humorous way said, Coleman, wherever you are, if you're anywhere, you've been holding out on me, because this is Bookends, and this is the mono Bookends. Famously, Paul Simon doesn't want this record out there. 68 was the year where mono really started drifting away. Very few records were issued in mono. Some were not. But this is where everyone was jumping on the stereo bandwagon. Beatles White Album, et cetera, down the line, you name it. So there's not a lot of this out there, and I've never seen one in the wild. Every time I see this record, I look to see if there's a mono version out there. Coleman had one in his collection, so here's the card from the Coleman collection. Little crunchy, little noisy, but it is different. Now, Paul Simon, they've never reissued it in mono. Apparently, they never will. But I just want to show you this. It is interesting. This is my favorite Simon Garfunkel record. I do like the stereo better, but it's kind of nice to have a copy that I've been searching for. I'm not one that really is into searching for grails or looking for certain albums. At any one time, I may have 2 or 3 records on a wish list that I want, but nothing that, oh God, I have to have that. Blemish by David Sylvian was one, and it finally came out as a reissue this year, so I got it for a regular price. This actually has the poster, the mono poster by Richard Avedon. This photograph by Richard Avedon is no different than the stereo version, obviously. Photography, you don't have that, unless you're doing stereo 3D glasses and something like that, but that's not what we're talking about here. So this is my grail of the last year plus that I wanted to showcase here. Number 18, the question number 18 is space-themed album, a sleeve or a song. The orchestra. You know, I mean, we all know, or some you may not know, but Sun Ra is actually from Saturn. He's not an Earthling. He is from Saturn. And his output is vast and over the top. And you have to really be careful, depending on your musical taste, of what you choose. This is more of an R&B funky record compared to some of his records. He's done singles, he's done, free jazz, he's done just an amazing array of things. This is very funky, and Yochanan, I don't know if he's Israeli, if he's Arabic, if he's, I don't know him personally. All I know, he's got this shit-ass, wild, crazy man voice, not unlike the Arthur Brown or Screaming Jay Hawkins. I Put a Spell on You, that area. This is more of a comp of various things from different unreleased stuff and singles, extended versions, just a variety of comp. And this was on Norton Records. This edition is from 2009, this collection. Rocket Ship Rock. And of course, you see the space image on the cover. Okay, the next question is, show some VCLT, which is Vinyl Community Love Train, is when people gift other Vinyl Community members, or a present you got. So I want to show this. A new friend of mine the last year, his name is Todd. He's going to be doing some videos on here in the Vinyl Community. And he gave me this album by Low. Is it Mimi Parker just passed away, their drummer and vocalist, and Low. A duet, soothing. I want to kind of compare to Mazzy Star, but not quite as ethereal, but a beautiful record. I've heard of Low over these years. I've never owned an album by Low. So it's really great when, someone gifts you something that you kind of latch on to, that maybe that you never dove into. I have so many records. It doesn't mean I love or know of everything. So when someone you trust turns you on to something, and this is really a beautiful record. I played it 3 times now, and I really like it. And it is called The Great Destroyer. I don't know what year this came out. It looks like 2004, Rough Trade Records, 2004. And Mimi Parker, he made some beautiful music, that's for sure. And lastly, show an album from 1973. We're 50 years later, that's why we're showing this album. Now, early 70s were great years, so I want to show something that wasn't really loved by a lot, by the masses at the time, including myself. I bought it right when it came out, and it was Lou Reed's Berlin. There's a follow-up, pretty much a transformer, and it seemed disjointed. It seemed a little too cerebral. It seemed calculated, but over the years, I've grown to love this record, and it's amongst my favorite Lou Reed albums. He did a live video. I think it's the director, the artist, designer, Julian Schnabel, I believe, directed a film version of him, a live film version. Not sure if it was at the Berkeley School or in New York, performing this entire album. And I think this is a masterpiece, but this is one of those masterpieces, in a way like the first Velvet Underground album, that really didn't connect with people till literally decades later in some cases. There were no obvious singles. There's Sad, Sad Song. It goes on like songs of baby crying, and just sort of introspective, dark album. But love this album from 1973, Berlin. So that's it. That's the Vinyl Tag 2023. Thank you. Links below. See ya more in the new year. Mazzy loves you.